I checked my bank account one more time before getting out of the car. $12.37. That was it. That was all I had left after rent, after the electric bill, after buying the cheapest ramen I could find at the corner store. The warehouse loomed in front of me like some kind of concrete monster. 3 stories of gray nothing, sitting in the middle of an industrial park that looked like it had been abandoned since the 80s. No other cars in the parking lot except for a beat-up Honda that probably belonged to whoever was supposed to train me tonight. I'd found the job posting on some sketchy website at 2 in the morning, right after my landlord had slipped another late notice under my door. Night supervisor position, excellent pay, immediate start. The pay they'd listed was more than I'd make in a month at any normal job, way more, which should have been my first red flag. But when you're down to your last $12, you don't ask too many questions. The front door was one of those heavy metal things with a buzzer system. I pressed the button and waited, bouncing on my feet to keep warm. October in Chicago was already getting nasty, and this place didn't seem to have much in the way of heating. Yeah? The voice through the intercom sounded stressed. Edward Schmidt. I'm here for the supervisor position. A long pause. Then the door buzzed open. The guy waiting for me in the lobby looked like he hadn't slept in about a week. Average height, stocky build, wearing a brown suit that had seen better days. His hair was doing that thing where you try to cover up a bald spot, but it just makes it more obvious. He kept wiping his forehead with a handkerchief even though it wasn't that warm inside. Mr. Schmidt. He stuck out his hand. Andrew Wheeler. Everyone calls me Garrett. His handshake was sweaty and he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Thanks for coming in on such short notice. No problem. I looked around the lobby. Fluorescent lights, industrial carpet that had probably been beige once upon a time, and a security desk that looked like it hadn't been used in years. So what exactly does this place do? Storage, warehousing, you know? Garrett was already walking toward a set of double doors. Come on, let me show you around. The warehouse floor was huge, rows and rows of metal shelving stretching up toward the ceiling, most of it empty from what I could see. Our footsteps echoed in the space, bouncing off the concrete walls. The lighting was dim, just enough to see where you were going, but not much else. So, I'd be supervising what exactly? I asked, following Garrett down one of the aisles. Night shift operations, making sure everything runs smooth. He pulled out another handkerchief and wiped his forehead again. It's not complicated work, mostly just keeping an eye on things. We walked past more empty shelves. I didn't see any other workers, didn't hear any machinery running. The place felt dead. How many people work nights? Just a couple. You'll meet Eddie in a bit. He's been here forever. Garrett stopped at a metal staircase leading up to what looked like an office with windows overlooking the warehouse floor. This'll be your station. The office was small but functional. Desk, chair, filing cabinet, and a bank of security monitors showing different angles of the warehouse. Most of the screens just showed empty hallways and storage areas. Now, before we go any further, Garrett reached into his jacket and pulled out a laminated sheet of paper. These are the rules. You need to read them. You need to follow them. Every single one. Every single night. I took the sheet and looked it over. 5 rules, typed out in bold letters. 1. Do not enter the break room after 11 p.m. 2. Do not watch the security monitors alone. 3. If the lights go out, do not move until they come back on 4. If a man in black asks for you by name, do not respond. 5. If you hear clicking sounds, lock your door immediately. I read through them twice, waiting for Garrett to crack a smile or tell me it was some kind of joke. He didn't. Seriously? Dead serious. He wasn't wiping his forehead anymore. Now he was checking his watch every few seconds. I know it sounds crazy, but you follow those rules and you'll be fine. You don't follow them. He shrugged. Well, let's just say the pay is good for a reason. What kind of storage facility needs rules like this? The kind that pays what we're paying. Garrett was already backing toward the door. Look, I gotta run. Eddie'll fill you in on the day-to-day stuff. Just remember what I said about those rules. Wait, that's it? That's my training? But he was already halfway down the stairs, moving faster than I'd seen him move since I got here. A minute later, I heard the front door slam shut, and then it was just me and the empty warehouse. I sat down at the desk and looked at the rules again. This had to be some kind of hazing thing, right? New guy gets the weird list. Everyone has a good laugh when he freaks out. Except Garrett hadn't looked like he was setting up a prank. He'd looked scared. I was still staring at the laminated sheet when I heard footsteps on the metal stairs. Slow, deliberate steps that echoed in the quiet space. You must be the new supervisor. The guy standing in my doorway was maybe late 40s, average height, wearing a gray uniform with a name tag that said, Eddie. His hair was black and perfectly combed, like he'd just stepped out of a barber shop. But something about him felt off. Maybe it was how pale he was, or how his eyes didn't seem to blink as much as they should. Edward Schmidt. I stood up and held out my hand. His handshake was ice cold, not just cool, but actually cold, like he'd been standing in a freezer. Eddie Marquez. I've been here 23 years. 23 years. Wow. You must have seen a lot of changes. 23 years, he repeated like he hadn't heard what I said. I know all the procedures, all the protocols. 23 years of service. Right. So what exactly do we do here? Garrett wasn't very specific. Eddie tilted his head slightly like he was thinking about the question. We maintain inventory. We follow procedures. We ensure compliance with operational standards. Okay, but what kind of inventory? What are we storing? I've been here 23 years, Eddie said again. The inventory changes. The procedures remain constant. 23 years of service. I waited for him to say something else, but he just stood there looking at me with those unblinking eyes. So, should you show me around? Explain the routine? The routine is simple. Monitor the facility. Maintain security protocols. Follow the established procedures. He paused. I've been here 23 years. This was getting weird. Eddie, are you feeling okay? 23 years of service. The procedures are clear. The protocols are established. He turned toward the door, then stopped. The break room is off limits after 11 p.m. This is important. Yeah, I saw that on the rules. Why is that? But Eddie was already walking away, his footsteps echoing down the metal stairs. I watched him through the office windows as he walked across the warehouse floor, moving between the shelves until he disappeared into the shadows. I sat back down and looked at the security monitors. Most of them showed empty corridors and storage areas, but a couple showed what looked like a break room and some kind of loading dock. Everything looked normal, boring even, just a regular warehouse at night. Except for the rules. And Eddie's weird behavior. And the way Garrett had practically run out of here. I checked my phone. 10:47 p.m. Still had the whole night ahead of me, and I was already starting to understand why they paid so much for this job. It wasn't the work that was hard. It was the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with this place. A sound echoed from somewhere deep in the warehouse, not footsteps this time. Something else. Something that might have been metal scraping against concrete, or maybe something dragging across the floor. I looked at the rules again. Number 5. If you hear clicking sounds, lock your door immediately. That hadn't been clicking, but it hadn't been normal either. I got up and walked to the office door. There was a deadbolt on the inside, which seemed like an odd thing to have on an office door. I tested it. It worked fine, sliding into place with a solid thunk. Another sound from the warehouse floor. Closer this time. I went back to the monitors and scanned through the different camera angles. Empty hallways, empty storage areas, empty loading dock. But on one of the screens, the one showing the break room, I thought I saw something move past the doorway. Just for a second, just a shadow. But it was there. My phone showed 10:52 p.m., 8 minutes until the break room became off limits. I kept watching the monitors, but everything stayed quiet. Eddie was nowhere to be seen. The warehouse looked completely empty, except for me. At exactly 11 p.m., I heard the first wet, dragging sound coming from the direction of the break room. I looked at the rules one more time, then at the deadbolt on my door. This was going to be a very long night. I heard the wet, dragging sound again, coming from somewhere near the break room. It was 11:03 now, 3 minutes past the cutoff time. Rule 1 said don't enter the break room after 11, but it didn't say anything about checking it out from the hallway. I grabbed one of the flashlights from the desk drawer and headed downstairs. My footsteps echoed way too loud in the empty warehouse, but I kept going. The break room was at the far end of the main floor, past rows of mostly empty shelving. The closer I got, the colder it became. Not just chilly, actually cold, like walking into a freezer. My breath started coming out in little puffs. The dragging sound had stopped, but now I could hear something else, a wet, rhythmic noise that might have been breathing. The break room door had a small window in it, the kind with wire mesh embedded in the glass. I crept up to it and peered inside. Darkness. Not just regular darkness where your eyes adjust after a minute. This was thick, heavy darkness that seemed to push back against the glass. I held up my flashlight and clicked it on, but the beam just stopped at the window like it was hitting a wall. That's when the clicking started. Sharp, rapid clicks echoing from somewhere behind me in the hallway. Click, 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 getting closer. Rule 5 flashed through my mind. If you hear clicking sounds, lock your door immediately. I spun around but didn't see anything. The clicking was coming from the direction I'd just walked, bouncing off the concrete walls and metal shelving. Getting louder. There was a storage closet about 10 feet away. I ran for it, yanked the door open, and dove inside just as something big moved past in the hallway. The closet had a lock on the inside, another weird detail that was starting to make sense. I turned the deadbolt and pressed my back against the door. Heavy breathing right outside. Not human breathing. Too deep, too slow, like something with lungs the size of garbage bags. The door handle rattled once, then stopped. I held my breath and counted to 60, then another 60. The breathing faded away, moving back toward the break room. When I finally crept out of the closet, the hallway was empty again, but the temperature was still wrong, still too cold. I ran back to my office, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Eddie was waiting for me. He stood by the desk, perfectly still, hands at his sides. His shadow fell across the floor at an angle that didn't match the overhead lights. It stretched too far in the wrong direction, like the light was coming from somewhere else entirely. The inventory requires constant monitoring, he said in that flat voice. 23 years of service. The protocols must be maintained. Eddie, what the hell is going on down there? Operational standards, compliance procedures, 23 years. His head tilted slightly, but his eyes didn't move. They stayed fixed on something just over my shoulder. The break room maintains optimal storage conditions after 11 p.m. Storage conditions for what? 23 years of service. The inventory changes. The procedures remain constant. I was about to ask him another question when every light in the building went out. Complete darkness. Not even the glow from the security monitors. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. Rule 3. If the lights go out, do not move until they come back on. I froze where I stood, barely breathing. Somewhere in the darkness, I heard Eddie's voice change. The flat monotone became a strangled gasp, like someone was choking. Something moved around me in the office. Slow, deliberate steps that didn't sound like shoes on concrete, more like something soft and wet dragging across the floor. It circled me once, twice. Air brushed against my face as whatever it was passed close enough to touch. Eddie's gasping got worse. desperate, panicked sounds that didn't match his usual robotic calm. Then it cut off completely. The lights flickered back on. Eddie stood by the window, but something was wrong with his face. The features were all there: eyes, nose, mouth, but they didn't quite line up right. Like someone had tried to put together a puzzle without looking at the picture on the box. His left eye sat a little too high. His mouth curved at an angle that made my stomach turn. 23 years of service, he said, but his voice sounded different now, hollow. The procedures are clear. The protocols are established. He walked toward the door, but his movements were all wrong. Too stiff, like his joints didn't bend the right way. His arms swung at his sides without moving his shoulders. His feet hit the floor at odd intervals, not quite matching a normal walking rhythm. "Eddie." He stopped at the doorway and turned back. That messed up face looked at me for a long moment. 23 years, he said. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the metal stairs in that same jerky rhythm. I sat down hard in the desk chair and stared at the laminated rules. This wasn't some elaborate prank. This wasn't hazing or a weird company culture thing. Whatever was happening in this warehouse was real, and those rules weren't suggestions. They were survival instructions. I checked the time on my phone. 11:47 p.m. Still had over 7 hours left on my shift. I looked at the security monitors, but half the screens showed nothing but static now. The ones that were working showed empty hallways and storage areas. No sign of Eddie, no sign of anything else. But I could hear sounds from somewhere deep in the warehouse. Dragging noises, clicking, and underneath it all, a wet, breathing sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I pulled out my phone and looked at my bank account again. $12.37. Rent was due in 3 days. The electric company had already sent 2 notices. I put the phone away and settled back in the chair, keeping the rules right in front of me where I could see them. Whatever was down there in the darkness, whatever had happened to Eddie's face, whatever was making those sounds, I'd deal with it. I'd follow every single rule, exactly as written, because I needed this job. And now I understood why they paid so much for it. The clicking started again, somewhere far below in the warehouse. I didn't move from my chair. I kept my eyes on the rules and waited for morning. I couldn't help myself. I had to know where Eddie went. Rule 2 said, don't watch the security monitors alone, but I was already alone, wasn't I? Eddie had disappeared somewhere in the warehouse, and I needed to find him. Maybe he was in trouble. Maybe he needed help. I flipped through the camera feeds, checking each section of the warehouse. Empty aisles, dark corners, nothing moving. Then I got to the break room camera. The door was opening. Slowly, like someone was being really careful not to make noise. But nobody came out. The door just kept opening wider and wider until I could see into the room. That's when I saw the eyes. Huge reflective eyes staring straight at the camera. They filled most of the doorway, way too big to belong to anything human. The rest of whatever it was stayed hidden in the darkness, but those eyes, they knew I was watching. They were looking right at me through the screen. I jerked back from the monitor, but I couldn't look away. The eyes didn't blink. They just kept staring, and I swear they were getting bigger, like whatever they belonged to was moving closer to the camera. I forced myself to check the other monitors. Most showed empty hallways, but one made my blood freeze. A figure in black was walking down the corridor toward my office. Tall, wearing what looked like a long coat or maybe a suit. It moved with purpose, like it knew exactly where it was going. When it looked up at the camera, I saw my own face. Not similar to my face. Not someone who looked like me. My actual face, down to the scar on my left hand that I could see as it waved at the camera. The thing smiled, my smile, and mouthed something. My name. It was mouthing my name. Rule 4 flashed through my head. If a man in black asks for you by name, do not respond. I dove under the desk just as footsteps started up the metal stairs. Heavy, deliberate steps that echoed in the stairwell. I pulled my knees to my chest and tried to make myself as small as possible, clutching the laminated rules against my chest. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and stopped outside my office door. "Edward?" The voice was mine. Exactly mine, down to the slight German accent. "Edward, I know you're in there." I held my breath. The door handle rattled. "Come on, man. Open up." "It's me." A pause. "Well, it's you, technically, but we need to talk." The footsteps moved into the office. I could hear them walking around the desk, checking behind the filing cabinet. "I know this is weird," my voice continued. "Trust me, it's weird for me too. But I'm here to help. The warehouse. It's not what you think it is. Those rules. They're not protecting you. They're keeping you trapped." The footsteps stopped right next to the desk. I could see black shoes inches from my face. "Remember when you were 8 and you broke Mom's favorite vase? You hid under your bed for 3 hours because you thought she'd never forgive you. But she did, didn't she? She always forgave you." My stomach dropped. Nobody knew about that. I'd never told anyone. "Or what about Buster? Your first dog. Remember how you cried for a week when he died? You buried him in the backyard with his favorite tennis ball." The voice was getting angry now, frustrated. "I know about the scar on your hand. I know you got it when you fell off your bike trying to impress Sarah Martinez in 4th grade. I know you still think about her sometimes. I know everything because I am you." I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed the rules harder against my chest. "Don't respond. Don't respond. Don't respond." "Fine." The voice turned cold. "You want to play games? You want to hide under there like a scared little kid? Go ahead, but you can't stay under that desk forever. And when you come out, I'll be waiting." The footsteps moved toward the door, then stopped. "Oh, and Edward. Your mom's maiden name was Fisher. Your first pet was a goldfish named Bubbles before you got Buster. You had a birthmark on your shoulder that you were embarrassed about until you were 16. You lost your virginity to Rebecca Chen in the back of her Honda when you were 19, and you still feel guilty about how it ended." My hands were shaking. Those weren't just memories. They were private memories. Things I'd never told anyone. Things I barely thought about anymore. "I know all of it," the voice said, softer now, almost pleading, "because I lived it too. We're the same person, Edward. The only difference is I found a way out." The footsteps moved to the door. "Think about it. I'll be back." The door closed. The footsteps went down the stairs and faded away. I stayed under the desk for another 10 minutes, counting my heartbeats and trying to process what had just happened. When I finally crawled out, my legs were cramped and my hands were still shaking. I checked the monitors again. The break room door was closed now, no sign of those massive eyes. The corridors were empty, everything looked normal. Then I found Eddie. He was standing in one of the warehouse aisles, perfectly still between 2 rows of shelving. His back was to the camera and he wasn't moving at all, just standing there like a statue. As I watched, something moved in the shadows behind him, something big and dark that seemed to flow between the shelves like liquid. It reached out. I couldn't see what it was reaching with, just a darkness that stretched toward Eddie's shoulder. Eddie didn't run, didn't fight, didn't even turn around. He just stood there as the shadow wrapped around him and pulled him backward into the darkness between the shelves. 1 second he was there. The next he was gone. I stared at the empty aisle, waiting for him to reappear, waiting for some sign of what had taken him. But the shadow stayed still, and Eddie didn't come back. I checked every other camera. No Eddie. No sign of whatever had grabbed him. Just empty warehouse and the growing certainty that I was completely alone now. Except I wasn't alone, was I? Something that looked like me was walking around down there. Something that knew my memories, my secrets, my name. And somewhere in the break room, something with eyes the size of dinner plates was waiting. I looked at the rules again. Rule 4 said don't respond if a man in black asks for you by name. It didn't say what would happen if you did respond. It didn't say what the man in black wanted or why he had my face. But I was starting to understand that the rules weren't just about staying safe. They were about staying human. About not becoming whatever Eddie had become after 23 years. About not ending up like the thing in the break room or the shadow that had taken Eddie without a fight. I settled back in my chair and kept my eyes on the monitors. Whatever was down there, whatever wanted me to come out, whatever was wearing my face, it could wait. I had rules to follow and a job to finish, even if I was the only human left in the building. I sat in that office chair for the next 6 hours, every light blazing, staring at anything except those monitors. Every creak of the building made me jump. Every shadow that moved past the window had me gripping the desk until my knuckles went white. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in the warehouse again. Slow, deliberate ones that could have been Eddie, or that thing wearing my face, or something else entirely. I didn't look. I kept my eyes on the laminated rules and counted my breathing until the sounds faded away. The clicking came back twice more before dawn. Both times I locked the office door and waited it out. The first time lasted maybe 10 minutes. The second time went on for almost an hour, moving back and forth through the warehouse like whatever was making it couldn't find what it was looking for. I didn't move, didn't check the monitors, didn't even go to the bathroom, though I really needed to. The rules said lock your door when you hear clicking, so that's what I did. By 5:30, I could see the first hints of daylight through the office window. Real daylight, not the sickly fluorescent glow that filled the warehouse at night. At 6 a.m. sharp, I heard voices downstairs. Normal human voices talking about coffee and weekend plans. The day shift was here. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the stairs, moving fast but careful. The warehouse looked different in the morning light streaming through the high windows. Still mostly empty shelves, still concrete floors and metal framework, but it felt normal now. Like a regular building where regular people worked regular jobs. I checked every corner anyway. Looked behind every shelf I passed. Kept my back to the walls and my eyes moving. The break room door was closed, and I gave it a wide berth as I walked past. The employee entrance was at the far end of the building, past the loading docks. I'd never used it before. Garrett had brought me in through the front lobby yesterday, but I'd seen it marked on the fire safety poster in the office. I was almost there when I heard my name. Edward? I spun around, heart hammering, but it was just Garrett. He stood by the loading dock doors, holding a cup of coffee and looking like he hadn't slept much either. His hair was even messier than usual, and his suit looked like he'd slept in it. You made it, he said, and he sounded genuinely surprised. Not pleased exactly. More like he'd expected to find my body somewhere in the warehouse. Yeah, I made it. He walked over, studying my face like he was checking for injuries. How was it? The first night's always the hardest. It was... I thought about Eddie's face rearranging itself in the darkness. About the eyes in the break room. About my own voice trying to trick me into opening the door. It was exactly what you said it would be. Garrett nodded slowly. You followed the rules? Every single one. Good. That's good. He took a sip of his coffee, but his hands were shaking slightly. Eddie show you around, okay? I almost laughed. Yeah, Eddie was very educational. He's been here a long time. Knows the procedures better than anyone. Garrett paused. You planning to come back tonight? That was the question, wasn't it? I could walk out that door right now and never look back. Find another job. Any job. Even if it paid minimum wage. Work 3 jobs if I had to. sleep on friends' couches, figure something else out. But I thought about my bank account. $12.37, rent due in 2 days, the electric company's final notice sitting on my kitchen counter, the job applications I'd sent out over the past month with no responses. And I thought about what Garrett had said yesterday. The pay was high for a reason. Now, I knew the reason. But I also knew the rules worked. I'd survived my first night by following them exactly. Whatever was in that warehouse, whatever had happened to Eddie over 23 years, whatever was hunting in the darkness, it could all be managed if you were careful, if you followed the procedures. "Yeah," I said, "I'll be back." Garrett's shoulders sagged with what might have been relief. "Good. That's really good, Edward. Most people don't make it past the first night, and the ones who do usually don't come back." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a white envelope. "Your pay for last night." I took it, feeling the thickness of the bills inside. I didn't count it right there, but it felt like more money than I'd held in months. "Same time tonight?" I asked. "Same time. Eddie'll be here to help with anything you need." Garrett paused. "Just remember, the rules exist for a reason. They're not suggestions. They're not guidelines. They're the difference between going home in the morning and what? And not going home at all." I nodded and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard Garrett talking to the day shift workers, his voice returning to something like normal as he discussed inventory reports and shipping schedules. Regular warehouse business. Outside, the morning air felt amazing, clean and warm and completely normal. I got in my car and sat there for a minute, just breathing. Then I opened the envelope. $800. Cash. For one night's work. I stared at the bills, counting them twice to make sure I wasn't seeing things. $800. That was more than I'd made in the past 3 weeks combined. More than my rent. More than my electric bill and groceries and gas money put together. No wonder Eddie had stayed for 23 years. No wonder he'd let whatever was in that warehouse slowly change him into something that wasn't quite human anymore. When you're desperate enough, when you're broke enough, you'll put up with a lot, even things that shouldn't exist. I started the car and drove home, the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like a promise. Tonight I'd go back. I'd follow the rules. I'd stay in my office with the lights on and avoid the break room and lock my door when I heard clicking. And I'd collect another $800, because whatever was hunting in that warehouse, whatever had grabbed Eddie in the darkness, whatever was wearing my face and trying to trick me, none of it was scarier than being homeless. None of it was worse than having my electricity shut off or getting evicted or going hungry. I'd survived one night. I could survive another. The rules would keep me safe, and the money would keep me alive. That was the deal. That was the trap. And I was walking right into it. I drove back to the warehouse that evening with 3 extra flashlights, 2 backup phone chargers, and a hand-drawn map of every storage room I could remember from the fire safety poster. I'd spent the day memorizing exit routes and safe spots, convinced that preparation was the key to surviving whatever lived in that building. The parking lot looked the same, empty except for that beat-up Honda and my car. But something felt different the moment I stepped out. Colder, even though it was still September. The air had this weight to it, like right before a thunderstorm. I checked my phone. 10:47 p.m., 13 minutes until the break room became off-limits. The front door buzzed me in without any questions from Garrett. The lobby was empty, fluorescent lights humming their usual tune. I headed straight for the warehouse floor, my footsteps echoing louder than they had yesterday. That's when I noticed the shadows. They weren't just dark spots where the light didn't reach. They moved. Subtle at first, just a shift here, a ripple there. But as I walked toward my office, I caught them sliding along the walls, following me. The clicking started before I even reached the stairs. Sharp, rapid sounds bouncing off the concrete and metal shelving. But this time they weren't coming from one direction. They were everywhere. Behind me, above me, echoing from the far corners of the warehouse like a dozen somethings were moving through the darkness. I ran for the nearest storage room, fumbling with my map. Room C7, about 50 feet to my left. I sprinted between the shelves, the clicking getting louder and faster, like whatever was making it was excited. The storage room door was unlocked. I dove inside and slammed the deadbolt home just as something heavy hit the other side. The door shook in its frame, but held. I waited, counting my breathing like I'd done the night before. The clicking moved past the door, circled back, then faded toward the break room area. When I finally crept out, the warehouse felt different again. Darker, even with all the overhead lights on. The shadows seemed thicker, more solid, and they were definitely watching me. I made it to my office and locked the door behind me. The security monitors were already on, showing their usual views of empty corridors and storage areas. Except they weren't empty. Every single monitor showed me, not someone who looked like me. Me. Standing in different parts of the warehouse, wearing the same clothes I had on right now, but each version was slightly wrong. One had his head tilted too far to the left, another's arms hung at an unnatural angle. A third was smiling, but the smile was too wide and showed too many teeth. I checked the monitor that showed my office. It displayed an empty room, but I was sitting right there. I waved at the camera. The monitor didn't show anything. According to the security system, my office was completely vacant. I flipped through the other feeds. The versions of me were moving now, walking through the warehouse with that same jerky mechanical gait I'd seen from Eddie. They weren't looking for anything specific. They were just patrolling, like guards. One of them stopped directly in front of a camera and stared straight at me through the screen. Its mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear, but I could read its lips. Come down and play. I jerked back from the monitors and focused on the laminated rules. Don't watch the security monitors alone. But I was alone, wasn't I? Eddie was gone. Garrett had left. There was nobody else in the building except whatever was wearing my face. The lights went out. Complete darkness, just like before. But this time it felt different. The darkness had weight, pressing against me from all sides like I was underwater. I could feel it moving around me, circling, testing. I froze, remembering Rule 3. Don't move until the lights come back on. That's when the voices started. My voice. Multiple versions of it coming from different directions around the office. Rule 1, said a voice to my left. Don't enter the break room after 11 p.m. Rule 2, said another voice behind me. Don't watch the security monitors alone. Rule 3, said a third voice right next to my ear. Don't move when the lights go out. But then the rules started changing. Rule 4, said a voice from the corner. Don't trust anyone who claims to help you. Rule 5, said another. Don't believe you can leave. Rule 6, said a voice that sounded like it was coming from inside my own head. Don't think you have a choice. More voices joined in, all mine, all reciting rules that weren't on the laminated sheet. Rules about staying forever. Rules about accepting your fate. Rules about becoming part of the warehouse. Rule 23, said a voice that was getting closer. Don't resist the transition. Something grabbed my shoulder. Cold fingers, just like Eddie's handshake, but the grip was stronger, more certain. 23 years, Eddie's voice whispered in my ear. That's how long it takes. 23 years of following the rules, keeping the things locked up, making sure they don't get out. But now my time's up. I wanted to turn around, wanted to see what Eddie had become, but Rule 3 kept me frozen. Don't move when the lights go out. You understand now, don't you? Eddie's voice was different, not flat and emotionless like before. Tired, relieved, The rules aren't protection. They're training. They're teaching you how to be a keeper, how to guard the things that live here. His grip tightened on my shoulder. I've been waiting so long for a replacement. Someone who'd follow the rules exactly. Someone who'd learn the procedures. Someone who'd understand that the warehouse needs a guardian. I tried to speak, tried to ask what he meant, but my voice wouldn't work. The things in the break room, the shadows between the shelves, the clicking in the darkness, they're not trying to hurt you. They're testing you, making sure you're worthy, making sure you can keep them contained. The voices around me were getting louder, more insistent. All my voice, all reciting rules that made my skin crawl. Rule 47, don't remember who you used to be. Rule 62, don't count the years. Rule 99, don't hope for escape. But I followed the rules, I managed to whisper. Exactly, Eddie said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. You followed them perfectly. That's how I knew you were ready. The lights flickered back on. I spun around to face Eddie, and what I saw made my stomach drop. His face was completely wrong now. Not just rearranged like before, but transformed. His skin had a gray, waxy texture like old putty. His eyes were too large and reflected light like an animal's. His mouth stretched too wide, showing teeth that were too sharp and too numerous. But worst of all, he looked relieved. Happy, even. 23 years, he said again, his voice echoing strangely from that impossible mouth. And now I can finally rest. His grip on my shoulder was like a vice. I tried to pull away, but he was stronger than any human should be. The warehouse chose you the moment you walked in, he continued. It could smell your desperation, your willingness to do anything for money. That's what it needs. Someone who'll stay no matter what they see, no matter what they become. I looked at the monitors. The versions of me were still there, still patrolling. But now I understood what they were. They weren't copies or illusions. They were previews. Let me go, I said, pulling harder against his grip. I can't do that. Eddie's transformed face showed something that might have been pity. The warehouse needs a keeper. Someone to make sure the things stay locked up. Someone to enforce the rules. Someone to find the next replacement when their 23 years are up. I don't want this job anymore. Neither did I, but want doesn't matter here. Need does. And the warehouse needs you. I could feel something changing in my shoulder where he gripped it, a cold spreading through my arm, numbing my fingers. The same cold I'd felt in his handshake. Don't fight it, Eddie said gently. It's easier if you don't fight it. Just follow the rules. Do your job. Keep the things contained. In 23 years, you'll find your own replacement. The cold was spreading faster now, creeping up my neck and down my chest. I could feel my thoughts getting fuzzy, distant, like I was falling asleep. The rules will make sense soon, Eddie continued. All of them, even the ones that aren't written down. You'll understand why the break room has to stay locked, why the shadows need to be watched, why the clicking can't be allowed to spread. I tried to remember why I'd come here. Money, right? I needed money, but that seemed less important now. The warehouse needed me. The things inside needed a keeper. That's it, Eddie said, his grip loosening slightly. Just accept it. Accept your purpose. But something in me rebelled. Maybe it was the part that remembered being human. Maybe it was pure stubbornness. Maybe it was the realization that Eddie's relief meant he was about to become something even worse than what he already was. I grabbed one of my backup flashlights and swung it as hard as I could at Eddie's transformed face. The impact sent him staggering backward, his grip finally breaking. The cold in my shoulder receded, and my thoughts cleared like fog lifting. "You can't leave," Eddie shouted, his voice distorting into something inhuman. "The warehouse won't let you. You've seen too much. You know too much." I was already running for the door, Behind me, I heard Eddie's footsteps, but they didn't sound like footsteps anymore. They sounded wet and heavy, like something dragging itself across the floor. The clicking started up again, coming from every direction. The shadows on the walls were moving faster now, reaching for me as I ran down the stairs. I didn't look back. I didn't check the monitors. I didn't follow any rules except the most important one. Get out. Get out now. Get out before the warehouse made me into another Eddie, another keeper, another thing that counted years instead of days. The employee entrance was at the far end of the building. I ran through the warehouse, past the break room with its terrible secrets, past the storage areas where things clicked and whispered, past the shelves that held nothing but shadows. Behind me, Eddie was calling my name, not shouting it, calling it softly, sadly, like he was disappointed in me. Edward, his voice echoed through the warehouse. You can't run from what you are. You can't escape your purpose. The warehouse has chosen you. But I kept running because I finally understood the real trap. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the rules. It wasn't even the things that lived in the darkness. The trap was thinking you could control it, thinking you could follow the procedures and stay safe and collect your pay and remain human. The warehouse didn't want to hurt me. It wanted to keep me, forever. I burst through the employee entrance like I was breaking the surface of deep water, gasping for air that didn't taste like metal and fear. The morning sun hit my face, real warmth after hours of fluorescent cold, and I stumbled toward my car with Eddie's voice still echoing behind me. Edward, not shouting anymore, just calling my name like he was disappointed I hadn't stayed for the rest of the lesson. My hands shook so bad I dropped my keys twice before getting the car door open. I threw myself into the driver's seat and jammed the key into the ignition, not caring that the engine turned over way too loud in the quiet parking lot. That's when I saw him in my rearview mirror. Eddie stood in the doorway of the warehouse, not chasing me, not even moving, just watching. His transformed face was too far away to make out clearly, but I could feel his eyes on me. There was something in his posture, relief, maybe, or pity, like he was sorry I'd chosen the hard way. I threw the car in reverse and peeled out of there, tires squealing on the asphalt. In my mirror, Eddie got smaller and smaller until he was just a gray figure in a gray doorway. But he never moved, never stopped watching. I was 3 blocks away when I remembered the laminated rules in my jacket pocket. I pulled them out at the next red light, staring at those 5 simple sentences that had almost cost me everything. Do not enter the break room after 11 p.m. Do not watch the security monitors alone. If the lights go out, do not move until they come back on. The light turned green. I rolled down my window and threw the rules out into traffic. They fluttered in the wind for a second, white against the gray morning sky, before a delivery truck ran them over. I watched them disappear under the wheels and felt something loosen in my chest. My phone started buzzing, Garrett's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again immediately. Another call, then a text, then another call. I pulled over and checked the messages. Edward, where are you? Eddie says you left early. Call me back. Look, I know the first few nights are rough, but you can't just abandon your post. We need to talk. The pay is good, Edward, really good. Don't throw this away over some jitters. I can get you more training, better preparation. Eddie says you've got potential. Call me back. We can work this out. I deleted them all without reading the rest. Then I blocked Garrett's number. The drive home took forever. Every shadow looked wrong. Every reflection in store windows made me check twice to make sure it was really me. But the farther I got from that warehouse, the more normal everything became. Traffic lights worked the way they were supposed to. People walked down sidewalks like regular humans. The sun kept rising like it always did. By the time I got to my apartment, I almost felt human again. Almost. I sat in my car for a minute, looking up at my building. Same cracked concrete steps, same peeling paint on the front door, Same pile of bills waiting on my kitchen counter. Nothing had changed, but everything felt different. I'd walked away from $800 a night, from enough money to pay my rent, my electric bill, my groceries, everything. I'd chosen being broke over becoming whatever Eddie had turned into after 23 years of following the rules. It was the right choice. I knew it was the right choice. But damn, it hurt. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, each step reminding me how tired I was. I hadn't slept in over 24 hours. My shoulder still ached where Eddie had grabbed me, and I could swear I felt a lingering cold in that spot. Inside, I went straight to my laptop and opened every job search site I could think of. Indeed, Monster, Craigslist, even the sketchy ones where I'd found the warehouse posting in the first place. I applied for everything. Retail jobs that paid minimum wage, restaurant work that would leave me smelling like grease, office temp positions that barely covered bus fare, data entry gigs that would make my eyes bleed from staring at spreadsheets, normal jobs, human jobs. Jobs where the worst thing that could happen was getting yelled at by a customer or having to work overtime. My phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but it might have been about one of the applications I'd just sent. Hello? Edward. Garrett's voice, but calling from a different phone. We need to talk. I hung up and blocked that number too. It rang again 5 minutes later. Another unknown number. The warehouse needs you, Edward. You can't just walk away from this. I hung up and turned my phone off completely, but I kept applying for jobs. Anything that would hire me. Anything that paid in normal money for normal work. Work where you didn't have to memorize rules about break rooms and clicking sounds. Work where your co-workers stayed human for their entire employment. By noon, I'd sent out 47 applications. By evening, I had 3 callbacks. By the end of the week, I had 2 interviews lined up. The first was at a grocery store, stocking shelves, cleaning floors, helping customers find the cereal aisle. $8.50 an hour, which was barely enough to survive on, but it was honest money. Clean money. Money that didn't come with a price you couldn't calculate in dollars. The second was at a call center, taking complaints about cable bills and internet outages. $9 an hour plus commission if I could talk people into upgrading their service. Soul-crushing work, but the kind that left your soul intact. I took both jobs. 60 hours a week between them, just enough to cover rent and ramen and keep the lights on. I'd be tired all the time. I'd have no social life. I'd probably have to find a third job eventually. But I'd be human. I'd sleep in my own bed every night instead of counting down 23 years in a gray uniform. I'd deal with angry customers instead of things that clicked in the darkness. I'd watch normal security cameras that showed what was actually there. My phone stayed off for 3 days. When I finally turned it back on, I had 17 missed calls from different numbers and a dozen text messages. All from Garrett, all saying the same thing in different ways. Come back. The money's good. The rules keep you safe. Eddie says you're perfect for the job. Don't throw this opportunity away. The last message was different. We found someone else. Kid named Marcus, just as desperate as you were. He starts tonight. Hope you can live with yourself. I stared at that message for a long time. Some kid named Marcus was walking into that warehouse right now, probably clutching those same laminated rules, probably thinking he could handle whatever came next as long as the money was good enough. I thought about calling him, warning him, telling him to run before it was too late. But I didn't have his number. Didn't even know his last name. And even if I did, would he listen? Would I have listened if someone had tried to warn me? Probably not. When you're desperate enough, when you're broke enough, you'll convince yourself that any job is better than no job, that any money is better than no money, even money that comes with rules about things that shouldn't exist. I deleted Garrett's messages and went to work. The grocery store was exactly what I'd expected. Fluorescent lights that hummed constantly, customers who treated you like furniture, managers who acted like stocking soup cans was rocket science. But the lights stayed on when they were supposed to. The customers were human, even the rude ones. And nobody handed me a list of rules about avoiding break rooms or locking doors when you heard clicking. The call center was worse. Tiny cubicles, angry voices in my headset, quotas that seemed designed to make you fail. But my coworkers complained about normal things like traffic and bad coffee. Nobody counted years instead of days. Nobody's face rearranged itself in the darkness. I worked both jobs for 2 months, 60 hours a week, barely scraping by, living on generic mac and cheese and whatever was on sale. It sucked. It was exhausting. It was barely enough to survive. But I was surviving, as myself, as a human being who got tired and hungry and frustrated with normal human problems. Sometimes I'd drive past the warehouse on my way to work. The parking lot always had a few cars in it now. The same beat-up Honda, plus a newer sedan that probably belonged to Marcus. I wondered how he was doing, whether he was following the rules, whether he'd figured out yet that the rules weren't protection. I never stopped to check. One night, driving home from my call center shift, I saw ambulances outside the warehouse, red and blue lights flashing in the darkness, paramedics wheeling someone out on a stretcher, a white sheet pulled up over their face. I slowed down, just for a second, long enough to see Garrett standing by the loading dock talking to a police officer, long enough to see him shake his head and point toward the warehouse entrance. Then I drove home and didn't look back. The next week, there was a new job posting on the same sketchy website where I'd found the warehouse listing. Night supervisor position. Excellent pay. Immediate start. Looking for someone reliable who could follow simple procedures. I closed the laptop and went to bed. The warehouse would find another desperate person. Someone else who needed money bad enough to ignore the red flags. Someone else who'd follow the rules until the rules became part of them. But it wouldn't be me. I'd chosen poverty over becoming another Eddie. Another 23-year guard of things that shouldn't exist. I'd chosen normal human misery over whatever that place offered. It was the right choice. Even when my stomach growled because I'd skipped lunch to save money. Even when my landlord called about late rent. Even when I lay awake at night wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. It was still the right choice. Because some prices are too high to pay no matter how desperate you are. Some jobs cost more than money. Some rules are really chains, and some warehouses are really prisons, looking for guards who'll lock themselves inside and throw away the key. I'd almost been one of those guards, but I'd run instead. And I was still running, one minimum wage shift at a time, one normal human day at a time, one choice at a time to stay on this side of whatever line separated people like me from people like Eddie. It wasn't much of a life, but it was mine.